Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Move Crush Count. Today, we are going live again, and this will be broadcast back on the podcast in another week or two. Today's interview is sponsored by J&L Marketing, a digital marketing agency helping business leaders outsmart and outmarket their toughest competitors, not outspend them. So if you want to move the crowd, crush the competition, count the money, check out J&L Marketing. Make sure you also check out movecrushcount.com for more on future guests and new episodes. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get notified on all new content coming up. We've got a special guest with us today. I'll introduce him shortly. And of course, we've got a familiar guest host, I should say, in Sandy Cerami, the solutionist from the great state of New Jersey. Welcome, Sandy.
Oh, the great state of New Jersey.
That's right. I say that. That's, for those of you seen some of our shows in the past, I've always got my Springsteen painting and guitar in the background. So he always introduces it as the great state of New Jersey. So I steal that from him. So today's show, all right, business development, it's critical skills I think every business leader needs to know. We've got John Traver in the house. My name, of course, Scott Joseph. John is a business development expert. He's going to talk to us about critical skills every business leader needs. If you want to be successful at adding things to your bottom line, if you want to increase sales, develop your staff, he's going to talk to us about all this stuff today. Welcome, John Traver.
Hey, Scott, Sandy, great to be back. You guys look marvelous.
I wore the hat today.
Scott said he was having a bad hair day, John.
No,
I'm jealous.
Well, what's happened, John, is so first off, I do want to, I should never say anything about a guest, but I feel confident in a hair contest. I'm going to outperform you, John. So, but I wear this hat on
your back.
I wear this hat because I get comments all the time and people commenting on the show where Sandy just outshines me on the hair.
I don't know about that, buddy.
I mean, that's top notch.
Years and years of teasing, my friend.
Hey, I just want to say for those in the audience, you have to be really comfortable in your own skin to hang with these two guys and the amount of hair they got. You know what I mean? You've either tapped out or you're just, hey, I'm just going to be comfortable with myself.
But JT, I'm going to just call it the way that I see it. See, if I was a big strapping dude like you that just had the success that you've had in your life and lived my life the way that you do, because I've been down to the Traver Connect Center, and it's a mind blower, by the way. I would ordinarily say, hey, it's got like a NASA feel to it. It's so unbelievably cutting edge, but I'm actually going to go SpaceX on you. I think it's got a real SpaceX feel to it. You have the, you've got the jam, baby. So forget the hair.
And all I'm thinking about is what we need to do next, And
that's why you're at where you're at, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It was great having you. Waiting on our buddy to come down here and hang out, got to get him across the street, for that tough steak, right? Texas.
Yeah.
Talk about an entrepreneur.
Through that one, right?
Talk about an entrepreneur, Mr. Dale, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I got to tell you, I was down there for our first episode with John when we did one on innovation, because I think he's a great, I mentioned earlier that he's a business development expert. He's also an expert, I think, when it comes to innovation, and that'll stand out probably in this interview as well. But John, when we moved offices recently, now don't get me wrong, this is not Traver Connect. This is not our executive offices here do not come close to what you got going on down there. It's awesome down there. But I did take that executive lounge area and we recreated it here. So we shoot podcasts from it. We do everything from it. It's great.
Nice. Are you talking the Texan room by the Executive Training Center?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to having some people here. COVID kind of was a little bit of a speed bump in terms of actually entertaining folks and getting after it. But I think the doors are cracked. I think
That didn't stop Ron and I from, coming in and invading Traver Connect for a visit.
and
We came down anyway.
waiting for all you guys to come back. We need to figure out how to do a couple events here together. Yeah.
That's true. Well, we got the business bourbon and cigars coming up here in a couple weeks down at Hyatt Coconut Point Resort and Spa down in Bonita Springs, Florida. So we're excited about that, and we're excited to have you sponsor that. I think you're going to love it.
Mm-hmm. Everything I've heard, the Dave Boyles of the world, Ed Bozart. I mean, these guys just continue to talk about the experience, the exchange with dealers. Heard from a few dealers that have been there. I love the brain trust in what you did.
Yeah, well, it's a neat experience, and it's not just fun. I worry about everyone thinks of it as a bunch of bourbon and cigars and having fun, but the content and what comes out of it from a solution standpoint tends to sometimes be overshadowed in the headlines. But that's the main thing, and that's why people keep coming back, and then we just have fun doing it. So,
well, listen,
No doubt.
Timothy Leary had his thought amplification resources. Ours is bourbon. Pretty simple.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Perspective. Hashtag Sandy. Yeah.
Yep.
So, John, I want to jump right in. I want to get us going here. For the people who may not know you, we've got a lot in the audience for Move Crush Count that are outside of auto. And I think if there's one, and you and I were talking about this off camera.
Yeah.
The auto industry can learn a lot from a lot of different industries, especially when it comes to the customer experience. You can look at the easy example would be Amazon, right? How can we make things easier from the customer to get the information they want to buy in a quick, easy process? I think the industry is trying very hard to catch up in that. One area that the industry leads in and that is its sales processes, its cross-selling, its upselling abilities, having a back end such as the service department or fixed ops department. If you look at all the different ways to grow a business, 3 different ways, right? You've got grow your customer base, grow the frequency, and grow how much money per transaction you're collecting. The auto industry does a heck of a job in those areas. And business development, what we're going to talk about today, and you're a prime expert, we'll get into that. And I want you to explain how you came up with this and your experience and knowledge in that area so everyone understands. But this is one area, even if you're outside auto, this is something you want to steal from auto, in my opinion, in terms of how auto follows up. Just an outstanding job. But go explain to the audience in your own words a little bit about your background, where your education comes from, and your experience.
Yeah, I love how you prop that up, automotive, Scott. There is a lot you can learn from this space. The industry's taught all 3 of us a ton, right? I mean, more than what we bargained for sure. Well, if you're asking about me, it depends on what stage a person is looking at my life. If I'm 8 years old, I mean, they're going to see an 8-year-old. So from where I'm sitting today, I high level, I think what some people see is I've been fortunate to be a business owner. To be an operator since 1991. So 30 plus years now owning multiple companies. And I will say this, not tongue in cheek. I just want to say humbly, by the grace of God, because I look at who I was in 1991, what I knew, what I didn't know. Okay. And just, there are certain things that we're each given. Like that, we didn't order. We didn't go through the drive-through, guys. And you know what I'm saying? And it could be things as simple as our eyesight or our hair, right? Our hair. So the thing I forgot to ask for, I guess. But by the grace of God, and you say, okay, give me some examples. How about the people in my career at that time? Think about Scott. You were starting J&L at the same time. Think about whether it's your bride or it's a friend, or right. And so we can kind of look past that stuff sometimes. I think it was Einstein. He said, there's 2 ways to look at life. He said, one way is that there are no miracles. Nothing's a miracle. And the other way, everything's a miracle.
Everything's a miracle. Yep.
Yeah. Have you ever read that?
I have.
Yeah, like gives me goosebumps every time I think of that. So I look back, so 30 years, okay, great. So but a lot of help. So I had the right people that shared the vision. My entrepreneurial journey, I would say, when I reached a point in the dealership where I felt like, gosh, I think the way everybody's going about it probably could be done a different way. I really wasn't the guy that wanted to spoil the party, but I did want to get it done. And so that's when I knew, hey, based on how I want to contribute to the marketplace, I think it'd be better I do it as an entrepreneur. So that was kind of my dive in. And then in terms of business development, this is, I would just say, I'm just thinking back to when I was young. So, and I don't mind talking about this. I'll just say I was adopted at the age of 7. And I can remember 4 years old, like clearly. Milwaukee, 41st Street, really close to Miller Brewing, hitting baseballs into an old warehouse that had a bunch of broken windows. True story. But I was adopted at the age of 7. And so Hank Traver, where I got my last name, was the only dad I've ever had. There was no dad even in that foster home. I had an older brother. And my dad wasn't highly educated. My dad would tell you, hey, I didn't even finish high school. He went in the military. He worked as a road construction inspector for the state of Wisconsin. So he was like testing cement culvert pipes that would be put in under roads and stuff. And then he also worked as a sheriff in law enforcement. So I'm watching my dad double down. And I would tell you this, a great year in our home, truthfully, was a lower middle class status. That was like we rang the bell. And most of the time it was below that. So we didn't have a ton of financial strength. But we had what we needed. And one constant I saw from my dad, whenever I would get a chance to be with him in the workplace, whether it was wearing a uniform or he's driving to some culvert creation company testing pipe, was how he treated people. And I thought about this in my career as time went on, whether it was the president or the janitor, guys, it was like everybody was equal. And like, I just sort of gleaned that from my dad. So that must have stuck with me because I've always had a bent for treating people right. So if somebody comes to my home and they're doing work, one of the things I'm going to work really hard at is creating equal ground. I'm going to ask them to do things a certain way. I might even tell them, hey, look, I'm probably going to be picky, but it's got to be, but I'm going to treat them with respect. And I think that's why that core belief lies so deep in me. So when it came to creating business development, that sort of was my ground zero. So like, when people think of Traver in the market of automotive, they think of the BDC, I think. Would you guys agree?
I do.
Yeah, our earlier work. And and so what I would say first to those that are watching is, if you have your own business or you're playing a key role in a business, I think every business starts with a question. And Scott, you've heard me talk about this before. Sandy, you have too with Ron. But I think there's a question that every business begs. And I'm going to maybe get into that today, depending on where you take me. But I think the question I was trying to answer with Traver Technologies in 1991 was, how do we update an outdated sales process? So guys, Scott, you were starting J&L back then, right? And
that's right.
I mean, tell me, the industry was not outdated in 91, true or false?
It was outdated.
We would hide the keys to the trade, and the customer's like, hey, look, I just want to go. And yeah, we've misplaced your keys. You'll throw the keys on the roof. Not that those that are watching that aren't in automotive, we didn't really do that, but basically were leveraging the customer.
John, at some point in the 60s, the guys at Hull Dobbs were doing that, like for real,
Yeah, well, and you grew up in Queens or whatever, I mean, I believe you. In Wisconsin, I'm not sure, maybe, but to your point, it was just, that. And then I remember Consumer Report, Motor Trade, Car and Driver, Road and Track, and they're exposing our invoice prices. And that was a big deal, right?
They had help, John.
It did help. It forced us to change. And what we didn't know then, I didn't know, was the internet was coming. We were only 10 years away from the internet. So kind of like sitting where we are right now, what don't we know right now that it'll be here in 10 years, right? And sometimes I feel like in that conversation, we get too hung up on having to know that as opposed to who we need to be now to be ready for that. Does that make sense? So that's in our control. So I just knew that, there was a consumer who wanted to be treated right. And there were retailers who were ready to embrace the change. So my early work was, there actually was a concept called the phone room. You guys remember the phone room?
Yep.
And so it was about, getting knuckleheads in a room and, we're going to smile and dial. Yes or no, guys?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember that clearly.
Yeah.
Sandy,
And
you remember that, don't you, Sandy? I mean, you were.
Well, you have to remember when
they
I was
started
using
bringing
the phone,
in
we were cranking to make the call, Scott.
That's what I thought. And then John, part of the problem after the cranking part with Sandy, he was only able to make a very limited number of dials because he had to keep waiting for the thing to come back around after he dialed it. He had to.
I thought you said he kept putting his mouth down by the mouthpiece, thinking a gumball was coming out.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh man, there's two of us, one of you.
I want to go back to something that John said because it speaks to, I think, the heart of everything that I believe the three of us hold near and dear, and that is the lesson your dad taught you in terms of how to treat people, right? And I think that is the DNA of the businesses that you've built, John. Ultimately, I know you're answering the question like in terms of how do we update an outdated sales process, but I also think that you keep the things that are true. The old golden rule. I mean, it's biblical in its origin. Do unto others as you would do unto yourself. Love thy neighbor. Those lessons they're spoken differently. It's all the same thing, and that's I think where I love the foundation that you build.
Yeah, thank you. Again, a lot of people that share the same vision, and it can start with one person, but you're going to need help, and so I think that whole idea. What I was trying to do, guys, was really simple. I looked at the showroom floor, and I saw problems. Okay. So first of all, I saw most salespeople making the bulk of their living with the hardest to close, lowest grossing, most difficult to work with source of business, the fresh up. True or false?
Absolutely true.
Yeah. And then we have sales managers complaining about turnover. It's like, bro, I mean, look at it's like my son, my oldest, played minor league baseball, and how they feed those guys and bust those guys and house those guys is ridiculous if you want them to be. So it's like, why would you expect now they have a different reason for that, I'm sure, and culling, whatever. But my point was quality showroom traffic could change everything. And the question was, so everything else was how to get there. Like, okay, we're going to talk differently on the phone. We're going to have keywords and phrases. We're not going to have scripts. We're going to have simple formulas. We're going to have a process. We're going to have some software. We're going to have an environment. Like all those things are so easy to figure out once you had sort of the underpinnings right. And so the BDS was the system. The BDC, it was like a weight room, full of hammer strength equipment. We were going to train 5 days a week and we were going to get strong, and it was 90 minutes a day. So we had our workouts. The BDM.
And just so for non-automotive people that are listening, when John is talking about BDC, he's talking about a business development center. And he was one of the first people to create, if not the first person to actually create an outsourced solution. So when we talk to John and label him an expert when it comes to business development, he's being a little humble here. He's truly an expert in this area. Well, paved the way for a lot of businesses. What was that, Sandy?
I was saying, you can go beyond expert. There's plenty of experts at this stage of the game.
Correct.
There's one originator, and
correct.
And so, that's who's in the middle of the screen right now. That's the person that originated the entire concept of BDC.
That is correct.
Well, what Henry Ford is,
which is innovative all on its own, by the way.
Yeah. I think Henry Ford. I think where I take great delight is in watching the evolution of the BDC. There are a lot of people that have poked the BDC in the eye and it doesn't work. And I may talk about that today a little bit just to hammer home a few points, but it's kind of like saying eating right, drinking enough good fluids, and exercising doesn't work. Well, I'm going to start with, are you working it first, right? Because we know it's timeless. And that's kind of what we were doing. I think the other thing I wanted to point out is the components were BDC. So to me, the facility needed to be professional. And you can kind of see that in the businesses today, right? Whether it's our ranching operation, which I may touch on today, because I want to show some contrast of business development in whatever business you're in. But I think facilities say a lot about how much you care about your people, how much you understand their desk, their workflow. And I think we can always be better. I think there's probably some line that you can cross, Mendoza line, if you will, where you go too far, So it's not about being posh, but it's about understanding, and there's a level of care there where now what you need, you can ask for, and you've already earned a yes before you even ask. And so that's kind of the seesaw that I'm always trying to work with our team. And sometimes it backfires, but it's very rare. I mean, because if the work's put in up front. So you have the BDC, then you got the system itself, which was our playbook, and then you have the BDM, that was our leader. And you need a leader for everything you're going to do. And I think where a lot of businesses struggle is they take a really good idea and they take somebody who's doing 18 things and they say, oh, Scott can handle that or Sandy can handle that. And a good friend of mine, Bob Beal, Bob, one of the things he reminds me of all the time, he said, look, if you have a new initiative and it really needs to succeed, make sure your leader has at least 60% of their time available to just focus on that. And so 60 is the number to write down. So the BDM for me, though, my mind map was that wasn't going to be an eternal BDM. That was our future sales manager. That was our future GSM, GM, and dealer. And so you go, well, how could that be? Well, they're going to rethink how to treat the customer. They're going to rethink how to talk to the customer. They're going to have keywords and phrases. They're going to have been really good educators and trainers because that's what they're doing over and over and over every day. And I can name names, as they say, right? I can name names of folks that are literally went this path and are either a platform president for AutoNation, running a very large group on the East Coast as COO, general managers, general sales managers that were salespeople that became BDMs that now today are contributing at a high level. You say, hey, where do you really take stock? I take stock in that because the roadmap was good. It's like raising your kids. You can't make the decisions for them, but what you can do is give them a roadmap. And what you'll find is there's moments where it's like, they don't see it yet. They don't see it yet. No. And then there's aha moments, guys. Am I right? Where it's like, they're seeing it now. They're getting it. They're picking it up. So what I discovered back then was we needed software to track. So we created really what was CRM. We didn't call it CRM because we didn't know the term yet, but that was the first CRM in automotive. And I'm not boasting, literally just answering and reflecting on what you guys have asked. So before VIN Solutions and Dealer Socket, there was Traver Technologies BDS system, the first software in automotive that did track all things BDC. And the only reason it did is because I looked at ADP and Reynolds. I couldn't find where to put a phone call. I couldn't find where to do the follow-up. That's how it happened. I was so committed to this process. And but like I say, what do we accomplish by ourselves, guys? Not much.
Agreed.
And I needed some help. Did I ever tell you guys about Tony Fujita?
I don't remember.
Okay, I want to share that. Okay. So I'll tell you what really helped validate our BDC model, and it got it accelerated. So I get this phone call, and it's Tony Fujita, VP of Merchandising, TMS. Now, for those that don't know who TMS is, that's Toyota Motor Sales, USA. That is the United States arm of Toyota. Guys, true or false?
That's fact.
That's true.
Yep. And they were in Torrance, California. And so he spoke English, but it was a heavy Japanese dialect. And hey, John, we see you doing much work in our best stores. And I'm going to hack the imitation here, but he's like, we may have questions for you about, and he's kind of taking me through it. And so I kind of was answering what I thought were rhetorical questions in the call. And then he said, look, I'm going to talk to John Matt, our VP of sales, and, we may get back to you. And I was just like exhaling, honestly, because I was living in a rent-a-center office pretty much. You know what I mean? We didn't own a piece of furniture. It was all rented. It was tiny. And, oh, please don't let them come here, But we were in like eight of their top 25 stores already in the United States. And what was happening is like Scott would call Sandy and Sandy would call John.
Right.
And it was We never ran an ad ever in our
Hey,
first
John,
9 years.
can I ask you a question to back up just a second? When we talk about, when you're looking at ADP or CDK as it is now, and Reynolds, and looking for fields that you could place what you thought was valuable information, and it just didn't exist. What were you drawing upon, other than experientially? What were you drawing upon? Had you observed other industries that had done this effectively? Was it call center background? Where did you get the roadmap, if you will, to map out all these fields that were necessary to, in essence, constitute the CRM or early day CRM?
This is a super vanilla answer, brother, but I'm just going to tell you, I've already told you. It was watching my dad treat people. It was asking the right question. And I'm going to see if I can't hammer that home today. Einstein had another great one-liner. He said, it's not that I'm so smart. It's that I stay with the question longer. And that's really, bro, that's what I was doing, right? I'm like, okay, that's not going to get us to that level. That's not going to, okay, but this will. Okay. And so that's where the idea came from. It was being able to just connect the dots and go, nope, that's not going to do it. So that was almost a Bush. Not going to do it. Wouldn't be prudent. That's as good as I can do.
Little Dana Carvey.
Fujita, when he called, it was big. And then he called a couple months later, asked me to come out. By the way, Toyota is 12 miles from where we're shooting this. They're in Frisco, Texas now.
Yeah.
Their corporate headquarters, serendipity.
The ultimate irony, right?
Yes, absolutely. So they asked me to come to do a regional meeting for the Cincinnati region. It was in Traverse City, Michigan, across the lake from where I grew up. It was just kind of, it was kind of neat.
Do you remember what year this was, roughly?
Mm-hmm. This is, I'm going to say 93, maybe 94. Am I close?
Yeah. Well, I'm just sitting there thinking, because, you and I both started our companies, our vendor, I should say, companies around in the same year. And so I was trying to think back of where I was at this point and some of these early conversations we had as well. So go on.
You were celebrating your 50th birthday, Scott, right about then, right?
My 50th? Well, not in 93, Sandy. I was celebrating yours. I mean, I remember this. You got to understand something about Sandy. All right. He loves to attack me. I'm younger. But man, I love him like a dad. I love him like a dad.
I see him, John. I see him in the woods. He's like a little deer, licking his paw, just looking around.
Yeah. You know why these guys, everybody watching, why these guys do the podcast from their own places is because in the same room, it's a fracas,
Separated by about 700 miles. Exactly.
Yeah. We're playing bodyguard.
I think we're going to do one live maybe on the Tuesday before we do our welcome reception down there at the event, Sandy. That might be a good opportunity.
I'll be sure.
Let me ask you, Ron's got a good question up here. I think we should ask you. So what do you think was the biggest contributing factor to the breakthroughs you've been able to create in your life and career?
Man, Ron, leave it. By the way, Ron, I heard your question at the end of the podcast with Westbury, and that was a brilliant question. So kudos to you, buddy.
Yep.
I should have known you were going to be throwing me some fiery arrow. The biggest breakthrough, I'm going to say in a word, failure.
Oh, what a great
and it's an honest answer because I had a company before Traver. I left the dealership, wanted to do training, and it failed. And I may talk about it today a little bit. I have a note or two just to remind myself, and I'll go a little bit more into that. But I honestly think, Ron, when I walked into the offices in Houston, Texas, after leaving Wisconsin, and I could see myself on the movie screen, and I was in the audience by myself, and I'm yelling to the screen, stop, don't do it. Because the last company I had, it got me hired by a major dealer group. Again, I'll tell that story in a little bit. And it helped me. But I think I just looked at failure. And so I think the words, how guys like go away for a weekend to build their mission statement and figure out who they're going to be in life when they get in their 40s, and it's that halftime Bob Buford. Steve Farrar said this to me one time, and I'm like, I'm subscribing to your mission statement. He goes, John, I can tell you my mission statement. I have it memorized. I said, what is it? He goes, don't screw up. And I'm and I'm like, I think I like that, Steve. So there was a lot of fear there, but not fear to go forward. I just didn't want to screw anybody else up, whether that was my wife, my family, my clients, my teammates. I wanted to get it right, But the thing is that if you don't make any mistakes, you really haven't learned much. There was a third base coach. He used to be the skipper for the White Sox, Gene Lamont. You remember Gene Lamont?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I used to tease my kids because he played third base coach for the Astros for a few years when we were in Houston. And it was like, it was full-time this at third base. And I called him Gene Hold'em Lamont because it was like nobody ever got thrown out. But, we lost more 2 to 3 ball games than I could remember because, bro, seriously? Wow. Your job isn't to get them thrown out. Your job is to take the close ones and be able to end up at 51% or better, so you do have to take some risks. So Ron, hopefully that kind of gets you started there.
It's a great answer, John. It's a great answer.
Okay.
Well, think about the products that you probably have started with Traver Connect. I can almost guarantee whatever you came up with originally, whatever new innovations you've come up with that you probably originally thought, this is going to be it. This is going to kill it. Within usually a month or two, customers start using it, right? That product's night and day different because the customer feedback gives you the true answer of what you need and where you need to adjust. So, I mean, I look back at any changes or improvements we made. It wasn't because, we thought to do them, but it was only because of the feedback we were getting from customers of what they valued and what they really wanted and needed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's your validation piece. They know. And, when you're in the design, there are some guys that we look at in the world, like an Elon Musk, as you say, Sandy, probably the brightest guy on the planet, right? There are some things when you're a designer, if that's your gift. So you got designer, developer, stabilizer. I'm borrowing from Bob Beal. Maybe I'll talk about this today too, if we have time, maybe after dinner at this rate. Designers could take white paper, complete white paper, come up with a concept, bang, thin air. So like electric cars, but the thing about designers that can be a little bit interesting, I'm going to use that word with quotes, is sometimes they come up with ideas that like might almost not make a lot of sense, like going to Mars. Like if you've looked at the whole SpaceX deal, we go to Mars, you guys do understand it's a one-way trip, right? It's not a shuttle that brings you back at 5 o'clock each day.
Right.
Like it's, hey, it was great seeing you guys. I'm going to live on Mars now. That's it. So like that for me is where the designer sort of can sometimes cross the line. Steve Jobs had some of that in him where, the market sort of rejected him. So my point to you, Scott, as you bring that up is, the ultimate test is what Scott just said. And that is, you got what say you, right? Here's what I say, creating it. What say you, the buyer? And so once you get a clear answer on that, to your point, Scott, think about all the things J&L, like I go back to 91 and I got to kind of smile a little bit because, well, we were educating stores that were developing their BDCs and implementing BDCs. You had teams of people going in developing marketing products. Well, think about how you and I hadn't even talked yet at that point, right? So you're creating leads and I'm creating the conversion of leads. The two of them together essentially created RDRs. We call that retail delivery in record in the automotive space, which means a new car hits the curb. It's now, owned by somebody. And that's really what it was all about, was this process.
You should have bought us back then.
Yeah. I don't think I could have afforded to, you know what I mean?
No. But
John,
hey,
I love your analogy.
I'm sitting here.
Go ahead.
I was going to say something real quick, Sandy. Sorry about that.
No, go ahead.
You said something earlier that I want to point out because we have a lot of entrepreneurs on the show. We have a lot of people that are in startups that listen in our audience. And you had said something that was very interesting. You were talking to, what was this title with Toyota again?
VP of Merchandising, Tony Fujita.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously a decision maker high up in the organization, you didn't get to that conversation because you were knocking on and cold calling him. You got to that conversation. So I get asked all the time, we've got great manufacturer relationships, right? And one of the questions I get asked from people is, how did you get those? We did not get those by just calling on them. We did something very similar to what I heard you say you did, right? And that is, we got into top dealers, whether it's in their regions, business centers, or anywhere in the country. And it is usually the dealers, especially the successful ones, that are your loudest voice. They're your advocates. And all of a sudden, now you're talking to an area manager or an after sales area manager. And now you're talking to a region or a business center, or a zone manager. And now you're talking to someone in national. And that's how you get in. You do a proof of concept with their dealers, right? And the dealers are competitive. When word gets out, it spreads pretty quickly, right? That this is a company you need to be doing business with. And I think in a lot of industries, that same model, that same blueprint can be followed. You got to go to the end user and then work your way back up. And then all of a sudden, now once you have established those relationships, you get to burn that candle at both ends, right? You get to sell to the original equipment manufacturer, the OEM, and the dealers at the same time, and you get support from both, and then it really explodes.
Well, if I'm in the audience right now and I have a business that serves, we'll use automotive, okay? You have a vendor service that, changes their life somehow, right? If I were you, I would stop for a minute and think, what if I were sitting in a seat as an OEM, associate? What would I need if I have this new initiative? What do I have to sell it to the dealers. I got to get them to buy in. So the easiest way to get them to buy in is already have proof source. Already have, hey, here's Scott, here's Sandy, here's John, and so on. And here's how they've done so far. And so you make their job easier by succeeding at the baseline level first. It's very, very simple stuff. It's very, very simple.
Well, and not only that, but when influential dealers are having a lot of success with a tool, a strategy, whatever, a process, whatever it might be, they lean on the OEM pretty hard. I mean, they can be very influential in making sure programs become OEM approved or, preferred or whatever that might be. And Michael Poro's got a great question. We're going to come back to it in a little bit. So hang tight, Michael, with you. I want people to walk away with almost like a guide. Like, how can they walk away if someone was going to start their own business development center, right? And I'm not talking about a company serving for their own business, their own specific business. What would you say is the first skill that whoever's in charge of that, the business itself, whatever it might be, needs to have when it comes to business development? What's the first thing you would recommend or the skill they need to hone in on?
Honestly, I think if you have the right idea, it's going to be about replicating that idea. So what's the word most often used to replicate a person's idea? What vehicle do we use? Huh?
You're talking about scale.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys have an idea on how to blank. You have to provide training. Training is the vehicle, right? First. So there has to be some sort of, if I'm going to duplicate, how are we going to do this? Now, training for some, I would start there, Scott. Okay. So you're going to need to have thought through how you're going to duplicate it. Mark Twain, what did he say about training? He said some wild stuff. He's like, training is everything. Training is all there is to a person. He literally said the peach was once a bitter almond. So he's kind of like talking about how it evolves. Or cauliflower is nothing but cabbage with an education. That was Twain. And I know. But so what I would say to you is that, there's innovation and improvement that you're going to need, right? Whatever your idea is, but it's going to require the right training. So training kind of can be a generic word. And I think some of you in the audience would agree. So, but I think I would start with the fact that there's this journey towards lifelong learning. And so maybe there is a perpetual GPA that we all get. There's a pastor who some in the audience may or may not know, but he's prominent. His name is Ray Ortland. And he created a few organizations, Acts 29, it's a church plant organization, the Gospel Coalition, Emmanuel Church in Nashville. He's an author, written a number of great books. He's a hunter. He's a man's man. And he's got this book that's an extrapolation of the book of Proverbs, and which really is a book about wisdom. And he said something that sort of supports what I'm trying to set as a baseline to your question, and that is everyone's on a path. Everyone's going somewhere. We agree so far, right? Life's a journey, but the end of it all is not just a place, it's a condition. So we're becoming the end of our journey, right? So as you ask that question, whether it's wise or foolish, every moment takes us a little closer. Training is one of our very important compass tools. So sometimes we get caught up in the product. So like for me, I would recommend, as I look back, my initial laboratory was the dealership, right? And so it was selling. And I remember they had these workshops for like, say, service. And Chrysler, it was a Dodge store, wanted you to go have somebody in attendance in order to get your whatever. And so part of dealer money. And they knew I would go to any workshop. So I think what I would say to you is, as you start your journey, know what you do best. For those that are old enough, stick to what you do best. If you're younger, you say, what's younger? If you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, I would say you get a free pass. You should still be trying to figure out what you do well, what you really enjoy. Would you guys agree with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
If you're in your 50s, I would say you better know what you do best. And you better be able to look in the mirror and say, hey, Traver, you don't do it all well, but there are some things you do well. And so you follow me? You should be able to discern by a certain point in your career. And so for me, I think what I've learned is that I really love to learn. That's what I learned. That early company I told you about, ITC, International Training Company Corporation, what I was going to do was provide training to organizations in southeastern Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And so I would write the content and, sell the attendance. And I had automotive dealers, I had real estate associates, I had cellular phone salespeople. That was back in the day when cell was just taking off. And there was a guy named Brian Ducharme, who was the GSM for Cellular One in Milwaukee. Yeah. And Brian, he didn't realize it, but he gave me a ton of confidence because he kept saying, hey, John, I want to get you in here like every month. Can you keep writing content? So my focus was always on communication training. I think anything that had integrity, improved a person's success in the market, when they were selling, that was going to be kind of, where to take it. So, and you got all kinds of problems you got to solve in business development, Scott, with your question, whether it's, it's best price, or do you have it in stock, or what's my trade worth, or, we're doing business with people that we can't see over the phone, as my buddy Danny Halfman reminds me of often, so, start with the fundamental core. One word that really helped me in my career when I was writing those training programs real early was one day I asked the question, I was like, I wonder what the word sell, like what it really means. This is pre-Google, right, guys? So I'm digging. And what I found was there were from the English, there's multiple German, and it works. It's all the way down to a Norwegian derivative. And what I remember is this, it meant to give. That was the first thing it said, to give. And I thought, well, that's a little different than what we got. And it meant, second thing it said is to, and I think you could look this up and find it today, to surrender. Listen to that, to surrender. And the third one was to serve. And I thought, well, shoot, this is not hard. So I think I based everything in selling off that initial premise, like that's what selling was. Fortunately, by doing those workshops, I was doing new hire training for the Rustero Group, a couple of their stores, the Mequon store, the Honda store, and Cedarburg store, Pontiac GMC, if I remember right. And I had a voicemail on my answering machine. Guys, you remember answering machines? Please say yes.
Sandy
Yes.
does.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And I was like,
I still have one, John.
You do?
It's right next to my fax machine and my beeper.
Go ahead, Scott. He's all yours.
I don't even have to say anything. I just the audience knows.
JT, I'm gonna send you a text that'll give you a chuckle.
Okay, you got
after
to.
the show.
All right. Oh, it's after the show, so we can't use it. Okay.
Well, I'll send it to you now, but
all right.
I don't think we can. I don't think we can use it in the show. This is a PG-13.
Well, you're touching on John. You're touching on something here with training, and that's this. And I'm going to follow up with this. With what's the best in your experience, especially when it comes to business development? What's the best way to train? That's going to be my question. But before you answer that, let me just say this. I sit back and I hear there's always the question with a business, should I do it internal? Which most business owners, there's a lot of business owners that love that idea because they can control the quality. They just have more control over how it's done, what's being taught, this and that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or should I outsource? And one of the things you're bringing up training and the repetition that comes when I think of business development. Mm-hmm. I've always thought outsourcing just makes so much more sense. And the reason I say that is there's nothing I could do internally that would ever train these people to ever do it as well as a business that's all they do all day, every day. That not only are they being trained to do it well, mm-hmm. but the act of their job also serves as training. It's literally just nonstop, all the different various situations, things like that, right? It would take me as a business owner a tremendous amount of time to ever equal, if I ever could equal that skill set. So, I mean, what's your thoughts on that? And then my question is, what is the best way? Because if you're developing and training these people on how to do this specific role as a business development rep, what's been the most effective way to train those people?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing I would observe in the word training are the last three letters. Okay. It's not ED. It's not past tense ever. It's plural.
Got.
Right. That's the first thing. So like as result oriented as all three of us are, because I know these two guys, for those that are not, I know these two guys and they don't get to where they are without being result oriented. So it's you have to sort of put your snaffle bit in your own mouth and rein yourself in like, hey, okay, that was great. And I can see they're growing. What's next? So it's always plural. It's always plural. Okay. So that's one. Two is it's kind of like a ball game. When you throw the film, like you might have won by 2 touchdowns. Like the Rams mopped the floor with the Cardinals last night, right? I mean, it was ridiculous. Now, I'm sure that when they hang the film up, though, today and they prepare for Tampa Bay, they're probably going to find some things they don't like that they still want to tighten up. And that's what training is, too. I would just say you can always be a little bit better. So what you want to be is teachable yourself if you're leading that initiative. And then the third part is you talked about in versus out. Most of the stores, so you're talking like Traver Connect here, we take calls for service departments. And I mean, we do other things. We have software that we can put in the store and run the whole thing now. And there's a different way we can go about it. But when they call us, they're usually saying, hey, we're building our own or we have our own and we should be talking to you guys. What do we do next? So where it always ends up is we get into the cost per hour and we say, okay, if you're going to pay that agent $15 an hour and you're going to need, let's say 2 people, that's easy math. 15 and 15 is 30. So you're going to spend $30 an hour. Are you going to work on both at the same time? Yeah. They're going to be 8 to 5. Okay, great. So who's catching calls from 6 to 8? The lane. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, who's catching calls after 5? The lane. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So who's catching calls on Saturday? The lane. Okay. So you can see you're still not fully covered. So, all right, but you're going to spend $30 an hour. So then we get into, you realize you can spend $1.50 an hour and we can put 14 people on that. wait, how much did you say? $1.50 or $4 or less than what you could hire one person for.
Right.
But the problem with that is there's some trade-offs. So you go, well, they don't know my advisors intimately. Okay. So hybrid becomes a solution for that store where you lead with one or two people, you do backstop because otherwise you just price yourself right out of it. And so how did you get there? Well, you subscribe to training, to learning. You realize, okay, hey, I know there's some people that probably spend a lot of time on this that know more than I do. The one thing that, where I think prevents some people from doing that is they've been taken advantage of before. And so, that's possible too, but if you do your homework, for the most part, you can find, people that can help you. Right. So, Sandy, in your podcast I listened to today, that hasn't posted yet, but I love the example that Westbury gave when he said, I don't know how I'm going to talk about that, but there are 4, beef processors. There's 2, right. Yeah, and there's 1 in Chicago, and so what is competition? So you have plenty of choices to be able to get you there in automotive. But if you're outside of automotive, I would say know your end, know how you want to do business. I think if we all own a McDonald's and 2 of the 3 of us serve soggy fries, we all get the same fries. But the way we do business, how we do business is what differentiates us. If one of us has the crispy flat fries all the time, then, again, that's how we do business. Yeah. Right. So that is just, to me, sometimes it's like I'm selling the same thing they're selling. Well, maybe. And if you are, then, is there a consistency about it that differentiates you? Things like this. I really want you guys to get to the experiences piece because I would love to talk about if there's enough time. I don't know if there is.
Yeah, we got time.
Do we?
Yep. Yep.
About the
we
contrast.
Can keep going.
Okay. If you guys are open to that, you had said to me we were going to talk about like, essentially disruptive experiences that I've had or something like that. Yes?
Yeah.
Well, I think anytime I want to always talk with every guest when it comes to, especially if they've done things that are disruptive. I want to capture that. I want to get a little bit about their thought process, things such as how did they come up with those ideas? How did they really truly become disruptive? So yes, I mean, we definitely want to go down that route. And as I said at the very beginning, I think your innovation will scream out. Before we get there, Michael Poro has got a great question, which he's serving it up to you on a silver platter here. And so let's keep this one brief. But why should if in elevator pitch this? Why should businesses do business? Why should a business do business with you versus other companies that they might outsource for business development?
Oh, is he talking about our business in particular?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, okay, let me just say this. I can't answer that question for you because I don't know what your must-haves are, right? But what I would say is this: know your must-haves, screen that company, see what kind of job they have done at understanding what your deliverables are, and then make your decision. So to me, if it's, somebody picking up the phone and selling you what's on the shelf, you may luck out, but you also may be disappointed. If it's somebody who assesses your needs, who asks you some questions around those needs, who really does have an understanding of what you're trying to do in its timeline, and then begins to make recommendations, you're probably heading down the path where you're finding a really good partner. So I think that's how you do it. How you choose an organization I'm part of or not, that's up to you. But I think that's a great evidence procedure for how to pick the right company for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'd actually, Scott, would like to dovetail off of John's comment because I know John's being humble right now. And I'm going to brag on John because I've had an interesting perspective over my career of seeing a lot of different providers in a lot of different disciplines. And I have had numerous conversations with BDC providers that are out there in the marketplace. I'm not going to name names, but I'm going to say this about Traver Connect specifically and John and his team. They find out what the end you have in mind is, and they start there and build towards that. And they have an incredible I'll call it cachet of resources that they draw upon that touch from the technology perspective, the training perspective, the mindset perspective, and the collaborative perspective that I don't think anybody else in the marketplace can even touch. I think that they are literally head and shoulders above on each one of those points that I'm making. And that is the differentiator for Traver Connect and John's team. And that's as best as I can say it.
I wrote down the same thing. When I heard your answer, John, I'm sitting here thinking, all right, well, it comes down to strategy, right? In other words, what separates you maybe from others is that you are a true partner in the sense that
Bingo.
you're making sure that your solution and or tool aligns with what the client either wants to accomplish and probably equally important wants to avoid.
Yeah,
right.
Most of the other players are out there running around with a hammer and everything's gosh darn nail, whereas John approaches it far differently. So maybe that says it effectively.
Well, and I will just say too, if you're looking for that perfect company, keep looking and promise me. Who had that question? Who had the question, Scott?
That's
Who wrote in?
That was Michael Poro.
Mike, promise me you'll call me when you find them. You and I will write the book together.
You'll see each other in Bonita Springs, buddy, in 2 weeks.
Can't wait. Yeah, no, there is no perfect. There's just this stumbling forward, where you're trying to get better continually. But to me, the authentic relationship starts with understanding what the need is, and also understanding what the perception of what the need is. Sometimes we can be with a client, Mike, who they don't get it, like what they want. So what our job is to do then is ask questions that help expand their view of what's possible. And then all of a sudden they go, wait a minute, I didn't even know that was an option. Yeah, that's one option. There's actually a couple more, depending upon how far you want to take this, depending upon how large of a service department you're going to have or whatever, you see. So, it's, again, if you stay with the question, it'll take you a long way.
Yep.
So what would you say if, all right, my goal is I want to do it on my own. I don't want to outsource. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not interested in that. I want to do this on my own. I want to increase sales. I want to develop my staff. I want to increase my bottom line. Those are the most important things to me. What's the second? You mentioned training, staying in your lane, knowing your outcome. What's the second critical business development skill needed to do it the right way?
Okay. Well, I would say this. If you have a staff on that initiative that's going to think like an owner, they're going to act like an owner, regardless of their title, right? And I would say make sure you know this because they eat the dog food, they drink the champagne. You know what I mean by that, right?
Yeah.
So, they actually look and listen to what this sales process feels like to a customer. There's somebody who doesn't fall in love with their product. You understand what I mean by that? Like, wow, isn't this awesome? Look, be careful, because as soon as that happens, you're no longer in the cockpit flying that thing. You're in the museum looking at it. So be careful. It's like raising your children or growing a garden. It all has stages. So I would say, if they have that attitude internally and externally, internally means, how's my staff doing? And then externally, the customer, and you stay close to the customer experience, then I would say, remember that it's a result-oriented mission, Scott. And sometimes we can get so focused on that end goal that we forget, what the end product tastes like to that customer or feels like to our teammate. And so you go, why is that important? Well, business development is also plural. It's not, hey, we developed business today. All right, well, y'all take care. I'll see you next year. What are you talking about? Tomorrow again, let's do it again, right? It's daily. And so the problem is when that happens, sustainability usually gets interrupted. That's usually what happens next. And that's where the call comes from the dealer where it's like, hey, yeah, this isn't really working for us. Which part? The part where you talk intelligently to people on the phone? The part, I'm being a little sassy, but it's like, seriously, I don't care how skinny you are. I don't care how, we can get somewhere. All right.
Well,
If
it's
you're willing
losing
to put
sight
the
of
work in.
what is the real priority, right? And the real priority in any business development environment is what? Your prospect, your client.
Yeah.
That's the priority at the end of the day. So to segue
Well, go
to the
back to what
disruption, go ahead.
go back to what he said earlier. Give, surrender, serve.
Yeah, I wrote that down. I think that is incredible. I can't wait to share that. I'll give you credit, JT. The first 2 or 3 times I use it. After that, I own it. But I have to say,
Naturally.
if we're going to segue to
I'll just start saying my friend Sandy Sarami taught me this.
I want to go to the disruption piece because I keep hearing this theme with you, and it goes back to the customer, right? The client, the CX piece of it. Tell me, has the disruption innovation that you have been delivering in your career time and again, does it go back to what you are able to see in terms of what matters most to a client, what makes the most sense to a client, even if the provider that you're serving doesn't see it before you do?
Really good question. How much time do we have? Because I want to know how deep.
Let it fly, baby. I'm here
You
for
sure?
you.
Okay.
Scott's always complaining in texts, behind the scenes. I'm cool, JT.
My hands are right here.
All right. All right.
I'm
Okay.
kidding you. I'm kidding you. Go ahead.
All right. Well, okay. So this is what I would say to you and to the audience. I would say, okay, if that's your question, then what I would suggest is you come up with some questions that are going to guide you through that. Just like the question Mike had before, it's contextual, right? So it's not like this cookie cutter answer. So if you say, okay, yeah, but give me something I can template, like Scott said, okay. So I think there's 2 questions. And by the way, a few years back, somebody had done an interview, wanted to do an interview. And so they gave me some questions they were going to ask. And that's when I first started having to look back and go, okay, what was I thinking then? What was I thinking then? And I discovered these 2 questions. I don't know where they came from. I didn't sit in a class or read it in a book. It just happened. And so these are the 2 questions that I can see in every organization I've been involved in and every client relationship. I'm literally asking these 2 things like subconsciously. And it's still very perplexing to me because I can't quite find their origin. So I don't know if it's just a product of having done it, but it was even there at Traver Technologies. So Traver Technologies, I've had a few real estate companies. I bought XPS Solutions, which is commercial real estate, self-storage, contact center, inbound payment processing. I got a ranch operation that works with a Fortune 300. Now Traver Connect. And what I would tell you is that I asked these 2 questions in all of those, but I don't ever remember sitting there at the beginning asking it. It just happened. So that's why there's some energy behind me sharing this. So I think to be a disruptor, to be innovative, I think the very first thing you got to ask about your business idea is it necessary? Is it necessary? What an extension of is it necessary is what does it actually change? Another way of asking that, another extension of the same question is it something that changes people's lives? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Because look, if you start answering, yeah, it changes people's lives and it's legitimate, then I think you got something. Okay. So that's the first thing. So like for all those companies I just named, I can, in this podcast, I'll give you an answer, like literally what I was thinking and how. So that's the first one. And the second one is sustainability. Does it have sustainability? And you go, well, what if you can't totally see the future? Well, I would say to you, look, partner, this is what we're doing. We're weighing the risk here. Does that make sense? All you're doing, so there's risk in everything you do. And you go, well, I wouldn't do that. There's risk there. Hey, there's risk in crossing the street. So it's really about, is a light about to turn red and is there a bunch of traffic coming? But you can look at a business and go, I think that's got 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we could evolve into this. You guys,
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does, John.
Yes.
My question is there a number in terms of the length of sustainability that you go, like it's got to at least be able to carry itself for the next 5 to 7? Is it 10 years? What's the number for you where it makes sense ultimately?
Okay, so Kevin O'Leary would fire me, right? Mr. Wonderful from the Shark Tank.
That's all right.
If you're not profitable look, I have a company that it drug red for a long time, broke his rule 4 times over. But I believe so much in that organization and what it can bring to the table that it was like, nope. I just know that space. I know the need. I'm waiting on the kids to grow up, if you will, in that organization and that market for them to see it. And it's an organization you guys know. So Sandy, I've benefited from those 2 perspectives. And here's why, buddy. All 3 of us are guilty of this. All 3 of us are guys that have some enthusiasm to them. Right? And the thing is, enthusiasm is easy. It's not hard. Yeah. It's easy to get excited about a new idea. So some of those that are watching out there go, oh, yeah, man, I have this great idea. Cool. How's your endurance? And that's where the sustainability comes in, because endurance is rare. You know, it's staying in it. And that's that Einstein thing again, staying with the question. Because that's how you'll make those changes. I think for me, the right questions up front will keep you in the hunt over the long haul. If you guys want examples, I mean, do you want me to give you some examples of those companies
as much as I want to learn what to do and what to ask, I also want to know what to avoid. So let me ask you this question. When it comes to trying to be disruptive or be innovative or create better experiences, where do you think business leaders are wasting time?
Perhaps if you think about those first 2 questions, are we leaning so hard on change for the sake of change? You know what I'm saying? Is it valid change? So it's that design, develop, stabilize thing again. Is it so far left in design, it's time's not yet? Example I always love to use is the iPhone. We all know the iPhone, it's been a decent creation, right? Version 12. But the iPhone in 1980 would have been a horrible idea. So I would think that sometimes, Scott, it's marrying up an idea with its timing. Just knowing, like, how many 20 groups have you sat through, Scott, where you're like, that's a great idea, but timing is horrible. You know, we're not ready for it, you know, like that. So I think having enough wisdom, I think that's where some, you know, it's damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead. Sometimes that's all it takes. Ben Stock is a guy who, as a dealer, partner in Paragon, you know, he demonstrates, and I don't know Brian personally, but what I see from Brian is here's a guy he's got a nice balance of both. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, you can look in the market and find examples of wise progress, and then you can look at flashes in the pan and go, that was foolish. You know, it was about $1, or it was about. So that's where, again, those 2 questions have been a friend to me.
John, what you just said, it's about $1. You know, we talk about this all the time, Ron and I, when we're doing training and development workshops and seminars. And, you know, we focus people on making a difference before you worry about making the $1, because the $1 usually follows the difference that you make.
Yeah, money will find you. The money will find you. It's really about, you know, like we'll have marketing discussions here, and you know, I sold Traver in 2000 to ADP, and our first trade show was January of 2000, and there was Cobalt came to the table and said, hey, we want to meet with you. And I went over to the Cobalt booth, went upstairs. John Holt, which, by the way, the CDK in CDK, the C is Cobalt. For those that hadn't done the homework on that, look it up. Yes, look it up. Okay. But wow. John Holt and I, so Scott, well, you and I were running around in the 90s. I'm running in these Toyota and Lexus events, and I'd see John Holt every time.
Yeah.
And he was the CEO of Cobalt, and they had branded websites and did a really nice job. Right idea at the right time. And yeah, they had their growing pains. Anybody who's waving people around third's going to have some problems. Anybody can hold the stop sign up all day.
If you have no problems, you have no growth, JT.
I'm not. That's right. And I'm not advocating make everything a problem, but I'm saying you got to understand how to work that turnstile a little bit, right?
Yeah. Sandy can relate. Back when he was running around and running into Henry Ford, there was all kinds of
I knew Henry Ford.
Here it comes.
Henry Ford.
Hey, Sandy,
Wait-
you better start wearing a helmet for these deals, okay? Life's rough, man.
Headgear. I got to get Ron Marvo to give me a little headgear from his
Like
boxing.
you should
gym.
get the leather one, so it kind of runs concurrent with Scott's whole circa 1940 deal. You know?
I've got a
The old leather
question.
football helmet, right?
Yeah.
Well, JT, I want to go back to something you said about Kevin O'Leary, right? And you said Kevin O'Leary, you violated his rule 4 times over. But, I'll point to 2 of the most incredible business success stories. I'll give you 3 incredible business success stories that got off to very rocky and I'll say fiscally bloody starts. One is Amazon, and I'm not a huge fan of Bezos for a lot of reasons, but I am a huge fan of his business acumen and what he's been able to accomplish, because he kept going when everybody else said, man, this is just a stuck pig bleeding to death here. And he kept on going. And look where he is today. Musk is no different. They were saying the same thing about Musk early on, that he was crazy. And if they're calling you crazy and you're an entrepreneur and you've had a track record of success in the past, probably want to keep going. And then I'll talk about Oprah. Oprah Winfrey early on, like they wanted her off TV early on. You know what I mean? And look where she is. She's done okay. And so O'Leary's perspective is as an investor, not as an entrepreneur. Your perspective is as an entrepreneur, somebody that knows how to work through and fix things. That's not a knock on Kevin O'Leary. He's looking at it from a different vantage point than you would be if you were actually starting a company and running it.
Yeah, it's back. Those are great examples. It's like Mike's question before. It's a contextual situation.
Right.
So Kevin is probably having to make that statement based as a blanket. His ceiling has some glass in it. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
It's breakable. And so for me, let's say I was absolutely broke. Well, I might not have hung on to that, but I looked at it as an investment and said, no, this industry needs this. It's worth it. It's okay. It's not great. It's not fun, but we're going to stay with this. And here's why.
Yeah.
And so that's that critical moment that where you're making that decision. And that too is part of the ball game of business.
Speaks to your first question.
Yeah.
Speaks right to your first question, right? Is it necessary? What does it change? Does it change people's lives? That creates clarity and specificity in terms of mission.
When those dealers, Scott, your question about, failing, when those dealers would call to cancel, it was ironic because a lot of times they'd call me and I would do the workshops. I wouldn't do any one-on-one selling. I mean, initially I did it all, but as we grew, it was like it was impossible, And so they'd call me. And so I'd say, okay, all right, Scott, that's fine. If you need to cancel whatever you need, I totally get it. Question, did you tell anybody else or are you just calling me? Oh, no, I just thought I'd call you. Okay, all right. Just so I know, how long has this been the decision? Did this just happen or have you been kind of mulling this over? Well, we've been struggling. All right, well, let me ask you this. If there's one thing at this point probably makes more sense to cancel than anything else, what is it what's the roadblock that's keeping you guys from succeeding? My people, they just, and you'll give me some soft answer. Mm-hmm. And so Scott, here's where you're at. And I owe this to you. And this is going to be a little bumpy in this call, but I owe this to you. Here's the thing. You do have a choice. You can go back to waiting on fresh showroom traffic. You can go back to turning salespeople over at 50, 60%. You can go back to having very little scheduled appointments each day and grinding customers and inflating trade values. And you can go back to that, just so you know, whenever you want. But here's the thing, where you are right now, you're somewhere in the journey of changing that forever as a culture.
Yep.
So, and then I would usually insert something funny like, so what is it? Is it the talking intelligently on the phone part that doesn't work? Or is it the actual, is it doing it for 90 minutes a day? Is that the part that doesn't work? Or your phones, are they not, and it's like, yeah, we suck. What do we need to do? You don't suck. You're just stuck. You're close. Just get rid of the T, So, there it is.
JT, have you ever read the book 3 Feet from Gold?
I haven't even heard of it. Is it good?
That is a book I would send to anybody that was calling to cancel because they just couldn't stick with it long enough to get through to the other side. All right,
Love.
3 Feet from Gold.
Love. Okay,
I
noted.
send them that book with a little handwritten note on the inside cover, and let the book do the talking.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap this up, John, with, because for one, literally, this is going on longer than we thought, and I appreciate it, man. But I forgot.
Scott, my nap time.
I didn't think I needed
too.
to bring my power cord on my thing, and my computer's alerting me to 3%, and it's dropping fast. So,
Oh, no.
so I want to make sure we get through this. Is there anything we haven't discussed in terms of business development that you think would be helpful to the audience?
Yeah, I would just say measure well as you're going through. Measure well, because if I told you I have a business that lost 50 grand last month, you go, "Well, I'm sorry. What are you talking about? They've been losing 150." Oh, well, that's congrats. Yeah, congrats. So everything in context. Measure. And I think when you measure, what you're doing is you're firing bullets. But once you have things dialed in, you can fire. You can then fire cannonballs. Make sense? That's very much marketing-esque. And then I would remember the couple of those laws from Maxwell where he talks about 21 irrefutable laws. I think it's law 3 where he's called law of the process. Mm-hmm. And it's that your leadership develops daily, not in a day. Not in a day. I had a tough call yesterday with the team from one of the organizations, and I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I said, "You guys aren't ready yet. How much more time do you need?" And to watch the leaders say, "Look, this is on me. I got this. We'll work through the night," inspired the heck out of me. But if they need a week, a month, or a year, they got it because I trust them that much. And then I would say priorities. Just know, I think that's like law 15 or 17 with Maxwell, and it's the law of priorities. Too many guys, gals come out and they put sand in the jar first. And there's gravel and there's boulders sitting in front of them. Put the big rocks in first. And that's, sometimes your people don't prioritize well, Scott. So that's what I would say.
All right. Well, we appreciate it.
Great points.
I want to thank John for a great interview. A lot of good stuff in here. Sandy, we appreciate you joining us as always. You guys can go and find out a little bit more about John and Traver Connect at traverconnect.com. I encourage you to do so. Once again, if you want more information on Move Crush Count, go to movecrushcount.com and make sure you follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You can join our groups even, and John's part of those groups. So if you got questions, you can go to our LinkedIn group or our Facebook group as well, and he'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Make sure you subscribe so you're kept up to speed on all future guests and new episodes. Today's interview was sponsored by J&L Marketing, a digital marketing agency helping business leaders outsmart and outmarket their toughest competitors, not outspending them. So your marketing, it can perform better, and you want an agency that specializes in combining deep data, marketing strategy, campaign support, and management. So check out J&L Marketing so you can enjoy the excitement that comes with moving the crowd, crushing the competition, and counting the money. Thank you all.
Great job, guys. My pleasure.
Thank you, JT.
Always a pleasure.